Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Tesla Motors Club podcast. My name is Seb.
I'm Doug.
And I'm Mike.
On today's episode, we'll talk about the October CyberCab event because we haven't done this in a while. We'll give you a quick redux. We'll also do some updates on everything that happened since we last did a show. And then Doug took a pretty cool road trip to see Starship launch out of Texas. Episode 70 starts now. Gentlemen, I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. And did I miss a memo here? Are we doing a Mike lookalike contest? Like, what's
Hey,
going
dude,
on?
memo was up in the break room. Yeah.
I clearly missed it.
Mike tends to do some facial hair typically, doesn't he? Don't you know?
Yeah, I
some
do.
facial hair? Yeah.
It's like always here.
It's Movember. I don't know. I haven't done it in a while. I thought it'd be funny to sort of, you know, rock out the goatee.
Yeah,
I had a
but
mustache all
you
through
also
high
got the
school,
top
so-
cap going too, dude. So, yeah.
Take that
I
off.
shaved my head. Yes, I shaved my head.
There
But
you
normally I keep
go.
it covered. You know, it's so important to wear a hat. There's so many times that my head has been saved because I had a hat on. Because I hit my head a lot. I'm sort of a tall guy, and the times I don't wear a hat, I'm bleeding. So it's kind of nice to have something. Though often you take off the hat and then there's like skin cells embedded in there. 'Cause
Oh,
I
God.
whacked it.
So
But
you and the stormtrooper whacking his head going into the ship, you know?
that's the way it is, man. That's the way it is.
I thought
And
you meant
also-
sun exposure. Yeah.
Actually, that's the main thing. I started wearing hats. Yeah, I wear a hat all the time because I drove a Miata for like, I don't know, 15 years in California. And, you'd have to wear a hat to protect your head. And then you get to where you're going, and then you have hat head if you take off your hat. So I just leave my hat on. And then somewhere in that process, I started just shaving my head altogether for Taekwondo because it just seemed better. And I've just kept it like that. So you still need a hat, and it makes you a little warmer. So I don't know.
There you
That's
go.
what I do now.
Man, you can tell we haven't talked to each other in a while because we started off strong on a nice tangent here. Huh?
So I'm still full of turkey or whatever. Actually, I had
Yeah.
minimal amount of turkey this year, but I'm kind of like stuffed with ham these days. So how you guys are doing?
Good.
Oh, we're doing well. Doing well. Went roast beef this year instead of turkey or ham.
That makes so much sense. It's like forget the turkey. It's just not that good.
Yeah, it's a little overrated, but you can't tell
It's
most people that.
traditional. I don't think it's overrated. I think most people don't really like it.
It's just
It's
it
just
tends
what
to be
the tradition
dry,
is.
if it's not made well. So
You're just not doing it right. That's all.
maybe. Well, guys, I mentioned it in the intro. It's been a while since we've done the show.
It has been.
And I feel like we've learned a couple of details, new things since the CyberCab reveal in October. One of them, an update to FSD. So, Doug, like, bring us up to speed. Like, what happened since? Like, how do we look at the event now?
Yeah. Well, the event was kind of interesting when we watched it. We did a live stream that was pretty well attended. But basically there were very little actual details. Elon had delayed the thing by 2 months, and that gave us the sense that he's really trying to have something to show. They did it at Warner Brothers. But there were no real details. No, like, when is this thing actually going to be available? There's kind of price suggestions, but no actual pricing. And he said very little. But the things he did say were kind of strange. He rolled up in this CyberCab, which was this kind of a gold hue sort of thing. It seemed to take some kind of design cues from the Cybertruck, but not much. It still had sort of curved lines. It had a sort of light bar in the front, which evoked the Cybercab, I guess, and the sort of single color looking metallic feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't say much about it. He basically said you could sit in it and spend more time playing with your phone. That's what he said.
Well,
But-
that's my goal in life.
Play
More
with
time
your
on my
phone more.
phone.
Yeah, and it's times like this where I kind of feel like Elon is a little bit divorced from reality. He called it, let's see, what did he call it? He called it mass individual transport, something like that, which is such an oxymoron. It's like saying full self-driving supervised, It's, I mean, mass transport is mass transport, which is like, guess what? It's a bus. Buses exist already. Electric buses exist already. Now it's, having nice sort of at your beck and call point-to-point transport is pretty nice, equivalent to like, an Uber today without having to tip your driver. But there were very little details. And one thing that also struck me as odd was that he presented the thing as something that would be sold to individuals. We've talked before that, it seems like they would be shifting more to selling the service as to selling a car. But, I mean, that's not the car I would buy for myself. Like if I was going to get a two-seater, I'd get, a fun roadster with a wheel I can turn, I don't see how that sort of vehicle can be sold to individuals without any form of actually driving it. I mean, at some point you want it to like, oh, I need to park a little better, or I'm trying to get into my garage. I want it to shift a little bit to the left. I mean, I can't see for a while being able to tell the car repark, 10 centimeters to the left, which some people need to do. And the only thing I can think about it though is suggesting that individuals would buy this thing to then make money for them as a like a an automated taxi.
It's a business, yeah.
It's a business. I don't really see individuals doing that. And the weird thing about it is, okay, then what about liability? If I own it and it does something bad or causes an accident or, even worse, kill somebody, I think I'm the one liable. Or are we saying whoever's like the passenger in the car with no controls at all can't be the one held liable? It has to be the owner. And I've always thought the only way any of these things could actually work is if whoever's supplying the software and or the hardware, meaning Tesla in this case, is the one to take liability. I mean, certainly Waymo is taking, Google or Alphabet is taking liability if a Waymo does something wrong, right?
Well, Mercedes is taking liability for their full self-driving. I forget what the hell they call it.
Yeah, but that was a very limited thing, right?
It was like, but nevertheless,
30 miles an hour on a highway.
They own it. They sold it, so they were taking liability. They were very clear about it.
That's the way it has to be, right? So I don't really see, and of course Elon said nothing about it, so I don't really see how they do that.
Well, it's interesting because at the LA car show this year, I was there the day it opened on a Friday, and Tesla had a floor show for the first time in, I don't know, 12 years or so that they actually showed up. And they had the Model 3, Model Y, the Cybertruck, but they actually had the robotaxi there. And it was interesting just kind of standing back and listening to the people as they circled around it and commented. Nobody was terribly impressed with it, and everybody commented it only sat two people.
Were there any Tesla representatives there?
Not at the robotaxi. They were all around the Cybertruck and the Y.
It's just that I can't nail down what the thing is actually called as far as what Tesla wants to call it. Even now, like, is it a CyberCab? Is it, it seems to me robotaxi is like, a more generic term. And in fact, I think someone else owns the trademark for robotaxi.
The trademark for robotaxi?
Yeah, because it's an old idea. Tesla doesn't own that, but maybe they can call it CyberCab. So, but yeah, it's two-seater, which seemed odd to me. A lot of times I'm out with friends, and
it's a two-seater with no room for luggage.
I thought it had space for luggage in the trunk.
Yeah, it had space for
very
luggage.
Small.
It seems to me the thing to do is you should have 4 seats, and that space should just be convertible to either be people or luggage. I mean, if you're 2 seats, if you're out, drinking with friends or whatever, you're not likely to have a whole lot of stuff with you. Maybe your wallet. You don't really need much else, depending on the weather. But if you're coming from an airport, you might be more on your own and would have a suitcase to put in the back. So it just seems like low hanging fruit that they just decide, oh, we only need 2 seats. I mean, why limit it like that? And certainly, if you're going to own it, you would want a vehicle with the versatility of either carrying 4 people or having stuff. So I'm not really sure what that is. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what Tesla ends up making and selling, even though it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because Tesla tends not to change things too much once they've decided this is what it is. And that's probably Elon's leadership style. So.
Well, we've talked about it on the show before, right? I think Lewis made a very passionate plea that Tesla would have to come forward and just take accountability or change the definition of who's liable in the case of an accident. So we'll see if that ever happens. But the business model is questionable from my perspective. I just don't see the appeal in buying just the CyberCab to have that drive me around if I could get the same experience from a 3 or a Y or an S or a Cybertruck, right? If it's all the same.
Certainly.
Right?
I mean, I think probably a 3 is nicer than that CyberCab. And if it is have, the robotaxi, if that software, actually gets there, what are we going to call it? Version 20, whichever, if we're on 13 now. I think you still want to be able to control your car.
Yeah.
And even if we look at iRobot, right? Like the event was called We Robot. And even the producer for like the movie kind of complained that it looked like Elon had basically just copied everything from the movie to the Robo van or Robovan to the robots and the car, of course, looked like this Audi they had. And even that Audi that kind of looked like the CyberCab looked had an option. I go, Will Smith is going, like, I'm going manual, and it had a
pulls out the wheel,
had a steering wheel that flipped up that you could drive. And yeah, if I were owning it, I would want that. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla did something like that, given that they've shown a trend towards steer by wire. It could even be again Will Smith. It could even be like I think in some Men in Black movie they had a car and it was
that tiny
driven
one.
with it had a PS2 controller or something.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So I mean, you should be able to drive with something like that.
Well, to your point, that might actually make the case for the yoke because with that form factor, you could hide it in the dash. A full wheel would be hard to conceal.
I mean, it could even rotate and just sort of slide into a slot, right?
Ooh, I like that.
I'm sure I saw it in some movie. It's not like I'm making it up.
Yeah. Well, not to be too negative about the event either, right? I think that it was an interesting futuristic vision. We've criticized certain points in the last few episodes, but one of the things that were rumored is that the cars themselves may have been running FSD version 13, which is now out, right? Dirty Tesla, who's been on the show, I think was one of the first ones to publish a video. So did you guys look at those videos yet? Do you have the version yet?
I do not.
Okay.
I've tried 3 times to get the car to download something new, and it's refused me every time.
I noticed that it's the YouTubers and those are the people that got it first. So I'm just sort of wondering how.
I'm definitely not on that list.
How well distributed this is. So, but Mike, you do have a car with hardware 4.
I do.
I only have.
I keep hoping.
Do you mean AI4?
So.
Yeah, right.
What's the point of making that label change? I don't get it. Does it make it cooler somehow?
It must.
It's cooler to me.
It's cooler to somebody.
Yeah.
But actually, that's a good point because on Reddit in particular, you're alluding to that a little bit. Said that the hardware 4 folks will be getting the new 13. The hardware 3 folks are kind of left in the cold, as it were, for some indeterminate amount of time.
And that switch happened with 12, didn't it?
Yeah,
where the hardware 4 people got it.
We got it first
before the hardware 3. I mean, it used to be that it seemed like everything was written for us hardware 3 folks, but now it's the opposite. Everything is written for the hardware 4 folks, and then they have to, try to squeeze it down into whatever our resources are. So does it speak the end for us? Elon did have a statement back at the Q3 earnings call. Yeah, it's been a while since we did a show. Back in the Q3 earnings call, it did come up as a question, and he basically committed to. He said we don't yet know. So at least he's admitting that, and even they promised it before that Hardware 3 had everything it needed. And so this is the first time he admitted that, okay, we don't know. And of course they don't know. They don't know about Hardware 4 either.
So I was thinking about this a little bit, Doug, and let me bounce this off you. So if I was a Hardware 3 car and I wanted to go up to Hardware 4, it's not just the computer. It's also the cameras that have to be upgraded.
Right. So
I mean, it's not just one component. It's the whole package.
What he said was that if it turned out that Hardware 3 did not have what was needed for proper FSD, then that people like me, and I assume it's just people that paid for FSD, years past, would get a free upgrade. It's not clear to me what that upgrade would mean. He did allude to the cameras. He suggested that the cameras are good enough, and I guess by saying that you would just need a new computer, and that he said it's designed to be modular. Now that's certainly true.
If they're good enough, then why go through all the trouble of upgrading the cameras on Hardware 4?
Well, I wouldn't say that's a whole lot of trouble. I mean, it's that there are better cameras available, and it just makes sense, like as you're installing new. If only for the fact that people use the dash cam feature, I would definitely like to have higher resolution, better cameras, because a couple times at night I've been a victim of hit and run, and at night those cameras are not enough to see the license plate. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the current cameras are good enough yet, but they might be. And I had some sense that version 13 was taking advantage of the better resolution cameras. So I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised that, given the way I think I understand how this sort of stuff works, like building that vector space of where stuff is, it probably doesn't need better resolution. Better resolution might make it safer for some things, but I don't think it's necessarily necessary. The question is, how do they do it if it turns out that it's not that Hardware 3 is not able to do robotaxi, not able to do a robotaxi. The question is, how do you cost efficiently get us to be capable? Certainly you could put another computer in, but I think that computer would have to be specially designed because the connectors are all different now. So you'd have to sort of...
Form factor is completely different.
You'd have to sort of go back. And now, are you talking about building an ASIC just for an application, specific IC, just for Hardware 3 update people? Does that make sense over giving us some huge discount on a new car, for example? Just paying the same price and then just being able to transfer FSD wouldn't be enough at that point, right? We'd have to get some kind of, but it might make more sense for them.
So,
right?
so here's
even
a question.
The development costs.
Here's a question for you from a business point of view. Let's say Elon's right, and he's going to offer an upgrade path to the Model 3, Model Y, Hardware 3.
Hardware
folks.
3. Mm-hmm.
Who's he going to offer it to? Is it going to be everybody, or is it just going to be people that bought FSD? That's a much smaller population.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to drive up the per unit cost for the upgrade. At some point, it's not worth it.
Well, if they make it, certainly.
Well,
if it's
all right.
free,
I'm assuming
it would certainly only be free for the people that paid for it. If you went through the trouble of making it, they might offer it for people to buy it.
They might. They have in the past.
So that's possible. If they have to do it anyway, they might do that. They'd have to price it just right though, because they don't want to. They constantly are trying to encourage people to buy new. That's part of the thing. Oh, just buy the next car. So I don't know. I'm sure they're pretty good about doing their pricing and stuff. So I'm sure they'll find that optimal space. And they've kind of done similar things in the past. paying for making a mistake beforehand. I would say the comparison would be for the Roadster, the Tesla Roadster, the original Roadster that first delivered at the end of 2008 or so. They made a promise. You could basically buy this battery replacement program or something like that. If you were concerned that your battery was gonna die and not last so long, you could pay, and I forget what the amount was, but it was totally a cash grab. It was like they needed money right then for the company. Kind of similar to how they cut the price of FSD, and I bought it, at a FOMO price, right? It's basically free money right now for something that you're promising later. So what they did was that you could pay, it was some thousands of dollars, I forget, but basically it was maybe underpriced, but you could pay that money now with the promise that, some years down the line, there would be a replacement battery available. And eventually they did have to develop that replacement battery because they made that promise and people paid for it. It's obviously very small. I mean, there are only so many Roadsters total made. Like probably total Roadsters is somewhere around, if I remember, it's definitely less than 1,000, somewhere like around, some small number compared to like even Model S deliveries or whatever. So I'm not sure what the numbers are, how many, Hardware 3 vehicles are out there, how many of them paid for FSD. But it's something to think about. At least it's somewhat reassuring that he's on record during an earnings call saying that he'll make us whole. I guess the question is how they actually do it. Do they do a good job of it, or do they just do the bare minimum for legal purposes for us? So it's hard to say.
According to ChatGPT, only 2,500 units of the original Roadster were sold, which is kind of insane that's what started
20.
it all.
Okay, that sounds about right. Yeah. So there was a Signature 100 in the US, and then there was a Signature 250 in Europe that I'm not even sure completely sold out. It really was a niche vehicle. It was very expensive. It was, over 100K or about 100K. And, around that time, they only had it for a little bit. And then, things like the Nissan Leaf came out. Like in 2010, you had other EV options. Literally, a lot of people got the original Roadster because it was the only EV you could actually buy. And then by 2010, you had the Chevy Volt came out, and there was like the Nissan Leaf. And even though, those were somewhat limited vehicles, particularly in their first generation, they were a lot cheaper than 100K two-seater.
I did want to mention, by the way, as we're talking about how many Roadsters were sold recently, was it late October? I think Tesla has surpassed 7 million vehicles produced over the company's lifetime. Isn't that
it's impressive.
the milestone?
It's impressive, and the Model Y has, for multiple quarters been the best-selling vehicle in the world, I think, which is pretty impressive. Before we completely go off from that CyberCab event, the other half of it was Optimus, right? It was called the We Robot event, right? So here's the real robots. What was interesting was at the time when we watched the thing, they had the robots interacting with people, and there was a robot that was serving drinks, and they're walking around and doing stuff, and they're kind of doing dances and stuff. And to me, that was clearly being remotely operated, particularly when they started talking, right? Like they're like talking to the person, they're asking, are you a robot? And they're being coy about it.
They're like, no.
And so since then, my suspicion has been proved out that they definitely were remote operated. Though I did get quite a bit of hate on in comments. Like I'm like, okay, clearly this thing's remotely operated. What do you mean clearly? That's you're expressing an opinion. like, I'm expressing an educated opinion based on what I see. Right?
Yeah.
And there were a few videos of, sort of not unbiased. Let me just say, Tesla fanboy type folks. Which, it's fine to be a fan or whatever. But they were like, "Wow, this thing is talking to me and so intelligent and whatever." I'm like, dude, come on. You realize that's just somebody, just sort of talking through the thing. And so, yeah, that was eventually proven out. But why? Like, why not just be upfront that this thing, it's still impressive if it's being teleoperated. Just the wonders of the hardware and the amount of dexterity and whatnot. And I'm sure that it also, even if it's sort of remote operated, I'm sure that it had like sort of pre-programmed motions that the operator could just, it's like a macro, that you press and it runs.
I was having flashbacks to WordPerfect with macros when you said
Excel.
Yeah, I mean, but every time it did a dance, it was always the same. Like if it did like some kind of like hula dance, and that was clearly just press a button and it does it. So that's fine, but why not just be honest about it? All I can think is that actually the whole event was about selling a dream or a vision of the future.
Yeah, for sure.
So here's the vision, and we're gonna like you go to the movies, you suspend disbelief, and there's a little bit of movie magic that makes things look real or whatever, even though they're not real. And maybe that was the idea, just to give that sense. But
they were on the movie set.
I feel like they should have been a little more straightforward of it. Now there was a video that came out a couple days ago, I guess on Thanksgiving, showing Optimus like catching a ball, and he said like, I got a new hand for Black Friday is what it was. So I mean, looking at this, it does look like maybe it's a different hand. It has like a kind of a glove over it, so you can't really see, you can't really see the mechanism so much.
It's Velcro.
So just to describe the video, someone's tossing like a tennis ball to Optimus, and then Optimus is catching it rather adroitly, but then kind of looks to the side and sort of nods. And kind of the way it's acting, it feels somewhat teleoperated. Some of those motions feel like it's just teleoperated. But the catching, I would find the catching a little bit more impressive if that is teleoperated, because that means that it has to be relatively low latency. But it seems to me you could just program, catch a ball. And to me, that's a less impressive thing.
But it's also upright. I mean, it's standing upright. That's impressive by itself. Trying to keep
it has
balance,
to balance
as you're moving. Yeah,
yeah, but I mean that's been a somewhat solved problem. Like, so that's not the teleoperator. That's why it is. It's really any teleoperation has to be a hybrid type thing, because it has to be able to sense on its own to how do I maintain balance.
Yep.
And in fact, at the We Robot event, every time you saw someone talking with the robot, its feet were just planted, and it would do its little dance. But part of that little dance has to be, maintaining. There's got to be something maintain balance.
I mean, at the moment, it's a great demo of the actuators, like no doubt. The technology, the way it's put together, the way it looks, it's impressive, right? But like, I'm not a fan of the whole selling it as if this thing is going to come out next month,
Well, yeah, I guess the main thing I see in it now, I've seen more impressive robots from other companies that I've been doing for longer. And as I said before, I think the main interesting thing about Tesla doing it is that they are more likely than anybody else to actually just sell it to normal people. And there are plenty of let me not say normal people in that case. There are plenty of Tesla fans that would buy it as it is right now, not able to do much, and then get occasional software updates. Oh, now it can hula dance. Oh, now it can catch a ball. Those would just be, it would be software updates. People will buy something that is not, you'll be waiting for the equivalent of FSD on your Optimus, right?
Hula dancing robot.
you're waiting for it to be more autonomous. You're waiting for it to be able to, walk upstairs on its own or whatever. And then we'll all be so impressed like we legitimately are with our own cars. Whereas, oh, it can actually go in reverse now when it couldn't before, when that would be something part of the original promise. But when you get like little features kind of dripped out to you and it's getting steadily better, you're probably a bit more accepting of that, and maybe even more excited, But there was a comment that's let me just find it. Someone just said a comment. He said, see Mark Rober and the basketball hoop.
Yeah, that's impressive.
But my point is that it's pretty, and it's been done in undergrad robotics classes for decades now, is, you see a couple frames of the ball moving and the basic parabolic equation, and you can predict pretty quickly where it's going to be, and then, move whatever hand to catch it. The Mark Rober basketball hoop, basically the hoop moves where the ball is going to be so that you can't miss the hoop, right? So this is a similar kind of idea. So that's not, programming wise, that's not impressive, outside of an undergrad class. So,
I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a second. I think that the interesting commonality between Optimus and the CyberCab for me is that it seems like there's solutions in search of a problem to a certain extent. Because when Tesla started, what got me attracted was the idea of accelerating the transition to renewable transportation. I think that was the mission statement, right? And now with CyberCab and Optimus, if there was a real business case for Tesla to start using these kinds of robots in their warehouses, they could buy them technically from Boston Dynamics, right? If there was such a compelling business case. But rather, it seems like they're building these in anticipation of some futuristic vision of the future. You know what I mean? It's like, it's cool, no doubt, but it feels different from how they started as a company, right? I bought into the early vision.
I mean, I have some feelings about some of that. I would say that in some ways Tesla succeeded, right? In terms of accelerating the advent of EVs. I don't know when it would be that we'd have an EV that normal people could buy, if not for Tesla.
Agreed.
Because they really pushed it forward, and Elon Musk, personally is probably responsible for a lot of that. Whereas, they could, for one thing, these kind of robots on the assembly line make next to no sense. What makes sense are those KUKA, robots that do purpose things. But if we're going to have those, Tesla, it's their philosophy to be very vertically integrated. There's also not necessarily a positive thing, but there is a not invented here kind of culture. Where they don't want to do things the way other people do things, which you can have that that concept of starting from first principles, but you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. And I've seen them get bit a few times with that attitude. There was a time when service was a complete mess because nobody knew what was going on. When I first got my car, the service guys, they didn't do the things they're supposed to do. And it's and the guy explained to me, see that guy over there and we don't talk to each other or something. I don't know why, but it was just the way the system was messed up. And a friend of mine that was a Tesla employee explained to me that, Tesla had been licensing some sort of software that organized service. And then somebody, probably Elon, decided that we should just have our own software. And so they wrote their own software. But, their own software didn't work so well yet. But they had also stopped paying for the existing, this is such a solved problem, right? There's so many car dealerships out there have, service, and they have all their service stuff dealt with some software, and Tesla decided to reinvent the wheel there. Now, I don't know, probably by now it's pretty good and pretty they have a fast feedback cycle so they can iterate and make it better for themselves. But anyway, that's part of Tesla's culture. And then the other thing is Elon. I feel like he gets bored and he wants to
Yeah.
be, he wants to do the what's fancy, what's interesting. He wants to be the center of conversation. That's why he wants, his own AI company, his own, social media company, and he gets to control it and be the center of attention there. So.
Well, since you touched on Twitter, why don't we talk about that for a second? But I did see a comment in the chat. Somebody was saying that Optimus was built so that we could colonize Mars more easily. That's actually a fair point, given how Elon operates, right? That might be a driving factor in maybe prioritizing that product over a different one. So that's an interesting point.
I mean, these are things that Elon says about a lot of stuff. I mean, they sort of promoted the Cybertruck as being, something you could drive on Mars. I'm sorry, you can't drive that thing on Mars.
That's
All
right.
The thing won't work in that low of a pressure. I get, but though maybe a modified version might. But
Also, trying to get it there may be a little bit complicated. No?
he's working on that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he could get that. That's what is I can't remember. Is it 100 tons to orbit or something like that?
Just the size of it, right? Like the James Webb Telescope, didn't that need to be folded? And maybe they'll make a foldable Cybertruck, but that's actually.
I mean, if you've seen, there are fairings. I mean, just the
Are
size.
they that big?
Rocket fairings they're fairings big enough to put a school bus in and bigger. The shuttle could take a school bus pretty much.
I didn't realize that.
So yeah, you could put Elon could get a Cybertruck into orbit if he wanted to. Probably get it to.
Don't tempt him.
Think about how much space was left when you saw the Falcon Heavy launch. How much space was in that fairing when that fairing opened up and you saw the Roadster? There's
Right.
You could have put it, especially with the Falcon Heavy. You could have put a Cybertruck in there. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, good point. Well, going back to software, one comment I did want to make is that however long it did take to build that software that they use, I think it's pretty cool that when I drive up to the service center, the gate rolls up when I approach. They have my car pulled up on the screen. They know my name. I mean, it is kind of cool.
And that's the advantage of doing stuff like that in house. But I think sometimes they do that switch a little early, and that's Elon too, right? He's like living in the future, even though you're not ready now. Right?
Yeah.
So.
100%. Well, Jake Hemo just put a comment in the chat, if you can bring that up again. So I know, Mike, you actually mentioned that Tesla is now allowing people to buy out the car at the end of the lease.
That's correct. As of the 27th.
Good segue.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it was officially announced that starting the 27th, that anybody with a Tesla could buy back their car off their lease, any Tesla, which on the surface sounds really good. Except some people have been doing the math from 2021, 2022, Model Ys, for example, which were selling for $70,000, $75,000 back in the day, and the residual is such that it's not worth buying back. I mean, the math doesn't work out. So you got to be careful. I suspect the buyback is more of an attraction for people getting their leases today with the $7,500 credit and cheap financing rates. But yeah, it's also an acknowledgement, I think, from Tesla that turning Model 3s and Model Ys into robotaxis is not going to happen, despite what we were told way back when.
Right.
Yeah. So that was the reason that they didn't do lease buybacks. I mean, they specifically stated that, these will be the robotaxis.
Right. This will be the pool we work from. Right.
So they were optimistic that, by the time 2 years or whatever that lease would be up, we'd want to keep them. Tesla would want to keep them and make all the money from using them as, automated Ubers. So that didn't quite pan out. But is it a good deal? Like in the past, the Tesla lease was pretty bad, I thought. Like back when I was I was waiting for my Model 3, you know, I could have leased the Model S for $1,000 a month, which was like just didn't make any sense given that I only drove like maybe, you know, 15 miles a week or something.
Oh, but it's a
The cost per
symbol.
mile would have been ridiculous. So
Think of all the attraction of the opposite sex you could get.
yeah, yeah, I could use my money more efficiently if that was the goal. But so they're buying the lease back like any normal car company or dealership would do now. Is that am I interpreting that right?
Pretty much. There is I think it's a $350 fee to initiate the buyout. But yeah, it seems to be pretty straightforward. You go to your app, you tell Tesla you want to buy it back, you pay your fee, and you're off and running. Just paperwork and financing at that point.
Is it a good deal? I guess it's a car that you're familiar with and you want to keep it. But part of the reason to lease at all is to, you know, get the next car, right?
Of course. Although I think that's changed a lot in the last few years. I think people are leasing because they want the new tech, not necessarily to keep it. I think lease is just like it's like an iPhone, you know. Keep it for 3 years and chuck it and get a new one.
That was my point, and for the longest time, and I would probably still make the argument of that people that are sort of new to EVs, you know, you might want to lease just because the technology is moving fairly quickly in terms of range. And though I've had my car for, you know, since 2018 and
It's worked for me, Doug.
It's worked fine for me.
All right.
And I've driven older Model S's. I just love them. I'm like, this is a great car.
But you don't find them a harsh ride? My father-in-law's got a 2016, and
that's
a little harsh.
That's what I'm used to. I'm used to feeling the road.
I like it too. Yeah. I mean, look, I don't think I'm the average Tesla owner at this point anymore because I've had the car for so long.
How could you say such a thing? Yeah?
And I'm planning to keep it until my kids don't feed in the jump seats, right? Because my car still has those. That's a big reason I'm keeping it. To be honest, though, the Plaid and the new long range after the facelift, they feel a little bit too soft to me. And I'm not the average buyer, right? But I like that mine's a little more raw. It's got the big wheels. It's got a different suspension.
It does.
I miss that feeling, you know? I felt too disconnected from the road in direct comparison. Obviously, they're awesome cars, right? So that's only my criticism because I'm used to my current vehicle.
Yeah, the difference is if I'm being driven, I probably would like it to be a little bit softer.
Supple. Yeah.
If I'm the one driving, I want to feel more connected to the road. These days, you know, I have an elderly father, and occasionally I'm driving, especially around the holidays, I'm driving him around, and you know, like every time I hit a bump, it's like ooh. he's feeling it in his old, you know, 90 plus bones. Yeah. And so, yeah, in those instances, yeah, I'd like it to be softer. And especially since I'm using autopilot more, or what are we calling it? FSD more. It would be nice to be a little softer. But yeah, when I'm driving, I want to feel it. So I guess it's you know, something for having adjustable suspension or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I like a I like a, you know, a tight car. Again, I was driving little small R roadsters
go-kart,
for 20 years. They're basically go-karts, and you know, you want to feel it. So
well, it's nice to have the option to buy the car. Leasing to me has always been more about the business value, right? If you have your own business, you can lease it, write it off.
Right,
and then if you wanted to, you could purchase the vehicle at the end of the lease, which I think is nice to have the option.
But these people are so some of the numbers I saw were like Model Ys in particular. They were going for 70,000 when they bought them or saw. The car is only worth about 26 right now, maybe 28. And there's still a 40,000 payout, you know, for the car if you want to buy it. Makes 0 sense to buy that car back.
Very true. Very true. Depends on the vehicle for sure. But with the announcement to now be able to buy the leases, the other announcement, I just saw a comment in the chat, was that there's going to be some changes about the EV tax incentive, right?
Oh,
And I
yes.
think
Oh, yes.
we talked about this before, right? I think the comment was why, if you can bring it up, it was by Electrified Light something. I forgot the name. Why is Elon okay with that tax credit going away?
I'm not sure he is okay with it, other than the fact he knows it would hurt his competition.
I think he's there. Yeah, a couple reasons. Tesla does better at selling EVs than certainly any other company currently
He got the
selling
highest,
in the U.S.
highest margin of anybody.
Right. So it probably, I mean, certainly they do optimize for that, rebate when it's available. But if it wasn't available, yeah, probably Tesla would sell fewer cars, but if they have some space to reduce the price too. So it hurts them less. And they still make, here's the bigger question. If and I guess this is a California thing, if the zero emission credits went away, because that's another spot where Tesla makes quite a bit to be able to sell those to other companies.
Sure.
But yeah, so the federal rebate going away probably hurts others more than it hurts Tesla. Then again, if the the incoming administration is likely to get rid of the credits,
Yeah, I
they're
was gonna
probably
say, that's
also
really the
likely to get rid
story.
of the mandates as well.
Yeah.
Though California has their own sort of level of control because they tend to
Yeah.
drive the market.
I think California is the underlying story of that tax credit. With the fifth largest economy in the world, they can dig deep. And given the fact there's no love lost between our governor and Elon, between Tesla moving their headquarters to Texas and some of the other threats that Elon's made, I think the governor just kind of said, "Yeah, we're done with this."
So what you're referring to is that California is proposing to expand their
They'll offer a
rebate?
credit. They'll offer a credit to replace the federal credit if it's removed for everybody except Tesla.
So, I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know if there's any legal limitations to how they can do that. But, certainly if the attitude is that we don't need it, and then, then it's money that, California's spending, then why give it to Tesla? But, in a sense of, I'm of two minds of it. Like in terms of sort of fairness, and I still think Tesla is the best car, and I want people to be able to buy it. I mean, I know plenty of people that are just sort of on the edge of being able to afford these things,
Sure.
and the response of demand to price is not linear. It's some kind of exponential, right? I mean, if you cut the price by half, it's not like you get twice as many sales. You
But
get probably
but
hundreds.
I think this
or
ties
times more
back to
sales.
something we've talked about in a past podcast where Elon and Tesla are so tied to one another now that when people get irritated with Elon, they automatically get irritated with Tesla. We're seeing more and more pushback about people not buying Teslas because of Elon in particular. Not because there's anything wrong with the car. They just don't want to be associated with Elon.
People do say that, yeah. I always do wonder how much that actually impacts the sales numbers, because clearly
I don't know.
something's still working for them. But I have friends who have said that to me.
Yeah.
And anecdotally, I've heard of people selling the car or not wanting to give him any more money. And this goes back a ways. I mean, back again with the original Roadster, Tesla raised the price in a way, and then Elon strangely tried to blame a customer for it when it was just that the customer relayed that information in a way that all of us could understand, as opposed to the way Tesla wanted to kind of, it's sort of a sly thing to do. What they
Right.
did was they raised the price by making things that were standard with the car, and they turned them into extra cost options. So it effectively raised the cost of the car by, I don't know, let's say $6,000, somewhere in that ballpark. And then, some people felt really burned by that. And back in 2009 or so when this happened, they were like, I'm never buying another Tesla vehicle or whatever. I don't know if they've changed their mind since.
Yeah.
Because, Tesla still, I think, is, again, it's the coolest stuff out there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Depending what you want, I mean, there are competitors. I think Rivian's doing some nice things if you want a truck and whatnot. But I don't know. If California only gave rebates to non-Tesla vehicles, probably Tesla would still be selling pretty well. I wouldn't I wouldn't think it would hurt them that badly. And if it's a more efficient way of using California funds, then maybe that's the way.
I think it's more PR than anything right now. Although it was interesting when I went and test drove the Rivian 3 weeks ago. I was talking to the salesman about it, and he said they'd actually brought in extra staff to handle the uptick in test drives. And it was almost all Tesla people showing up who either wanted to get rid of the current Tesla or were trying to figure out whether they were going to buy the Tesla or buy something else.
That's interesting.
It was very few people that were new to the EV.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it definitely feels personal in some way. Elon has insulted the California governor plenty of times, and it's one thing. It's one thing to just talk about facts too, but also just to with Elon's platform, he does spread, sadly, misinformation and rumors and stuff, and Gavin Newsom has been the target of that. So I mean, if that's the way you're going to treat it, stuff like that's probably going to happen. But it also, to say that Tesla has left California, I think that's kind of, that's not the reality. I mean, they're still, they still have the Tesla factory. They still have a technology headquarters there, and there's still plenty of people at
in Fremont.
That's where the factory is, but in Palo Alto on Deer Creek Road was the before they moved the headquarters to Austin, that was the headquarters, and there's still plenty of people there doing stuff. So it's not like Tesla's really gone. If anything, it's just they sort of expanded elsewhere, but there's still plenty of a California presence. So. And to me, I try to look past all that stuff. I'm still a fan of a lot of what Tesla does, and I love my car. So I'm hoping that some of this personality stuff is maybe just temporary, or just sort of changes with the wind. When the wind blows another way, it just will go some other way. So
yeah, I'm with you. And I would argue you can already see something happening, which is that there's now EVs and then there's Teslas, right? Like Tesla has retained its sort of brand value even now that there's options. Like some people just want a Tesla, I would always laugh when I was a teenager because I had a friend whose dad would keep buying iMacs and then install Windows on them. And I'm like, okay, so I guess you just like the way these iMacs look, but you want to use Windows. I think there's just some people that want to continue owning a Tesla, even when there's other options out there. But, I guess one more comment I saw in the chat was from Dimebags something. He was saying that they're still too expensive, which is a fair point. My opinion is, I think we're just going to see Tesla keeping the prices where they are. And the average price of a new vehicle is just going to keep increasing and close the gap eventually. I think that's what's going to happen over the next 5-15 years. I don't see the prices coming down all that much more. I think they're going to stay stable. Everything else just going to get more expensive. But that's, I'm not an economist.
I think it'll be less than 5. I think you're right, but I think it's less than 5.
Less than 5 what?
Years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, that was sort of another thing that we were able to infer from the We Robot CyberCab event, because a lot of people were thinking, we're going to see that $25,000 vehicle, and maybe the CyberCab with a steering wheel would be that vehicle. And it seems to me that Elon or Tesla has pretty much rejected that, and except that you can buy it yourself for $30K maybe, but who would if you have 30K, you're probably buying a, like a Toyota or something, a Toyota Corolla maybe or something.
What's that joke? What's that joke you've been making for years now? The $25,000 Tesla is.
Oh, did I say that? No, I didn't go that far. We were talking about oh gosh, was it 25?
Was it you, Mike? Someone kept saying.
No, it was the joke I was making, which was, let's say okay. I think it was more like 40 or 30. 25 is too less, but I think, let's say 40. The 40K Tesla is the 80K Tesla you bought 2 years ago or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
And that
Ouch,
that really hurt for Lewis, who got a Model S Plaid.
Yeah, that price dropped from 130 to 90. That hurt. Sure.
Yeah, so
absolutely,
kind of rough,
significant.
Well, Tesla moved operations to Texas. There's another company that Elon runs that happens to be headquartered out of Texas, and I think you did a little road trip recently, Doug, to see rocket launch.
Yeah. So I drove to the Integrated Flight Test 6 for Starship, and I drove from Maryland. And I stopped in Atlanta. And it basically was a 3-day trip. Like, I drove to Atlanta. If you were to drive without, if you just looked it up on Google, I think without charging, it was like a 22-hour drive. But I basically, with charging and stuff, I basically did, 10 hours of driving and then stayed someplace. So I stayed with some friends in the Atlanta area, and then I think I stopped at Beaumont, Texas, from Atlanta, and then I got there Sunday. I got to Brownville Sunday night, and so yeah, it was quite the trip. I mean, for one thing, the launch was amazing. It was extremely popular too, since they were doing the catch at the first stage, and that was successful in the first try on test 5, and then here's 6 about a month later, and so that there were so many people trying to see it. And driving on my way, I've never seen so many Cybertrucks, and it was the first time in a long time that I've had to wait at a supercharger, because there's a line of, especially between Houston and Brownsville, there were a lot of people, on the same route. So it was something.
And hey, not to cut you off, but speaking of Cybertrucks, I do see them around a lot more too now. And we should mention, for people who don't know, that Tesla now does offer demos, test drives for the Cybertruck. I did one about a month ago. Definitely interesting and fun.
Yeah. And I stopped and chatted with several people with Cybertrucks, and it looks pretty cool. I think, so now the test drives are available. I'll have to go get one. It's not the kind of vehicle that I need. So I won't be buying one anytime soon, but I definitely want to try it out, and I want its technology to start filtering through, especially the steer-by-wire stuff.
Yeah.
The 48-volt stuff, I think, is cool, but it's a little more esoteric. I mean, that's the kind of thing that is, transparent to the user. Like, the user doesn't necessarily need to know about that. But the steer-by-wire stuff, people would definitely be aware of, and also the rear wheel steering for a tighter, turn.
That was a little interesting, by the way, when I did the test drive, because I guess anybody can just go and drive these things, right? And not everyone knows it's got the rear, what do you call it? The rear steer?
Rear wheel drive.
Yeah, rear wheel steering.
So when I pulled it out of the spot, somebody else had parked it before, but the thing was like totally crooked, because it's almost like you're driving forward into a parking spot, right? Because you got to look in your mirrors, and as you turn the wheel, you can see the tires turning. So it's an interesting experience driving it, for sure. You gotta experience that for yourself.
Well, yeah, from what I've heard, people need to get somewhat used to it. And also, you probably do need to think a bit more. Typically when you're driving, it's only the front that's moving. So, but if the rear wheels are turning, then rear can swing out. So you have to think about that
Yes.
as you're maneuvering any place tight. So, but so you enjoyed it then? What did they just let you take it and just drive off, or did you have to have someone in the car, or how did it work?
I mean, they give you the typical tutorial, right? They ask you if you've ever driven a Tesla, and since I own one, I think she just gave me the card, and she's like, "Here, you go have fun. Bring it
Have a
back.
nice day."
Bring it back in 20 minutes." And I went to drive it with my son, who just cracked up because of the size of the wiper.
The wiper.
Yeah, I'll send you
Mhm.
guys a video. I mean, it's just hilarious. And by the way, I'm just telling the story while you pull up these the videos of the launch if you haven't.
Oh, is that what you want?
Yeah, I'm buying you time, my friend.
Well, that's fine. I think I'm.
Yeah, if
I
you
think
have
I'm
any
good.
videos of the launch. 'Cause
Yeah, well, let me just say, so couple things. One is just the road trip. It's a long drive, but it's for the most part a pleasure. My car is on. I think I'm hardware 3, and I just gotten an update to 12.5.4, I think. And so some of my complaints that I've talked about before were gone, but there are some new issues. Like, for example, again, like we'd had these roads that would be like 70 miles an hour, but there would be a minimum of 40 miles an hour. And the previous time I made a trip like this, the car would drop the speed to 40 miles an hour. And I honestly did not have that problem this time. I think somehow it would, those signs that said minimum 40, it somehow either it defaulted to whatever, GPS data it had, or when it saw it, it maybe could resolve the word minimum or something. So that was a whole lot better. The other thing about the trip is when I was on my way down there, there was some weather. It was somewhat rainy, and the maximum speed for FSD would decrease. But sometimes, just to be safe with all the people around me, I would need it to go faster than it was wanting to go. So I kind of had to step on the accelerator a bit. But for the most part, it was pretty good, except, I have an issue, and I think other people have talked about this, is with there's still some differences between highway and I guess what they had called city streets at some point. And the main difference is the speed. Now there's an option, and it kept asking me to turn it on, of it sort of auto deciding what the speed offset should be. And it was so bad at that. Either it would be too slow, or sometimes it would be too fast, or the speed limit would drop, but it would stay going fast. I mean, it was really kind of scary and annoying. So I switched that feature off. And when I switched that feature off, instead of, it would show like, okay, what set point I would have, but it seemed to ignore it. So I think even though I had that feature off, it was still activated. And so that was probably my biggest gripe. But I did come up with, separately, I came up with a hack, and I've seen people on TMC talk about, and also meeting some of these Cybertruck drivers. A lot of these people were relatively new Tesla owners, and they don't have the history that we have, like going with all that, like they have FSD turned on for them relatively recently, but they don't have the experience we have of like the incremental changes over the years. And one thing that the guy was talking about was that, at night I get this this warning that what do they call it? Driver attention detection, I think they call it, something like that, is unavailable because it's too dark in the cabin. Yeah, and I've said before, like, gee, if they just put like a little infrared illuminator in there, that would help. So just sort of thinking about this ahead of time, I got a cheap thing from Amazon. It's just a little infrared LED light. It's got sort of an array of LEDs. I assume it's gallium arsenide, so it's probably about 940 nanometers, I would say. And this is designed to go on on like a camera, So say if you're taking photos at night, you can get some infrared illumination. And if you look at it there. Now I can't really see it. I'm looking at it. What I see are very faint red. But typically they talk about the human eye can see to say 700 nanometers. And like I said, this is probably around 900 nanometers. But even though the sensitivity is low there, you can still kind of see it. And so what I see is like a small red dot. And you probably don't want this too bright on your face, but there are a couple settings. And I found that, okay, when FSD was forcing me to touch the steering wheel every few minutes because it couldn't see me, I was able to just sort of turn this on. And also you can get a camera preview, and it really does illuminate me in the darkness, and the car is able to detect my attention or whatever. So it's a little hack. I mean, I think I got this for $12 maybe, but just
Nice
have your own little infrared illumination. You don't want it too bright in your eyes. It might be, I don't know, might be some issues, but it seemed to be a nice little hack. So
Well, they initially claimed the camera inside the vehicle was meant to keep an eye on passengers, right? Like for the robotaxi future, I seem to recall that they added it so you could see what's happening in your car.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe that's why they didn't add a floodlight, IR floodlight, because they didn't expect it would be used to monitor driver attentiveness.
Well, they originally, back with the Model 3, so they didn't have it in the Model S or X. So when they first delivered the Model 3s, we just noticed that it was there, but they didn't really say anything about it. And it's only been relatively recently, in the past couple of years, that it was, actually doing anything useful for us. So I don't know. I mean, I think it was, and again, on my car, it seems like such an afterthought. It's mostly occluded by the mirror. It's not in a very good position. It's much better done in today's cars and the hardware 4 cars. And I mean, the only thing it can be is for, monitoring the occupants. But yeah, they should have like a little infrared, light in there. I don't know why they don't already have
Makes
it.
sense.
Because if you need to be able to see at night, or it should be able to see you at night. So anyway, you can do it yourself if you want. But yeah, anyway, yeah, I went down and yeah, the launch was amazing. And I would say if you can go down to Boca Chica, Texas, do it now. Do it soon. I do it like the next time they have a full stack there, because like that level of access that you're able to get there is, it's like being able to walk around the Saturn V during Apollo. I mean, you can get on the road. You're pretty close to it. I was there a year ago, about a year ago, I think before IFT2 probably, and they had a full stack. And I didn't realize that actually from the beach, you can kind of walk around and get on these sand dunes and get pretty freaking close to the thing. You can get pretty much right up on it. Let's see. Let me just sort of try to share it a little bit here. I mean,
Wow.
you can get
You
really
took that
close to
picture?
it. Yeah, I took this photograph.
That's insane.
That's crazy.
And yeah, you can pretty much,
That's amazing.
pretty much walk right up on these things.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's something else. Let's not look at that. But it is. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. That can't last, especially since they plan to increase the cadence, of launches. And when I came a year ago, you were able to go to the rocket garden near Starbase. So just up the road, like a few minutes towards Brownsville from this location, is the factory where they're building these things, and then they sort of bring them down to put them on the launch mount. I think there used to be like somebody's house there, so there's a road they couldn't close down, and you could get right up at the rocket garden and be like right next to, like I'm some ways away here. You get even closer to like a booster and a couple ships that were just sort of sitting in this rocket garden where they kind of stick them there for a bit. But now you can't get so close to it because I guess that house sold or something. So that road they're able to close off. Now the beach, Boca Chica Beach, is a public beach. And so the road to it is a public road. But I wouldn't be surprised if in the near future somehow Tesla is able to take over that road because
Yeah,
it
called
in some ways
national
it's a
security.
safety. National security. I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
nothing kept me from, here's a ship. Of course, it wasn't fueled yet, and I guess they might close it when they do that. But, you know, nothing was really keeping me from the thing, or someone could sabotage or whatever. Um, and also just for basic safety. I mean, if I were in that position that close during launch, I'd be fried or whatever, right? So I especially if they start having like a couple a day, which is like the goal or whatever. I can't see how you can do that and have that beach access open. But certainly it's going to be at odds with the public in terms of it's sort of like the People's Beach, not too far is there's a South Padre Island, which is where I watched from, and that's kind of more like a resort kind of town, whereas here you have a beach that people just drive up on and just sort of enjoy the Gulf.
Wow.
So, but yeah, I can't see that kind of access happening forever. So, if you get a chance to go down there, I would go.
How far back were you for the launch?
So for the launch, I was about 5 miles away. And let me see. I did take a launch video and I could share that with you. But let me just say, I wasn't taking a video for video's sake. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. So I just kind of was holding my phone in the general direction.
Before you play it, have you seen a space shuttle launch back in the day?
I totally wanted to go, but when I was that's the spacecraft of my era, right? Of my generation.
Yeah.
But I never got a chance. I kicked myself that I didn't make it down in 2011 to see the final launch. It was kind of hard though, because there were so many delays and it was hard to know when it was going to get scrubbed.
Right.
And I was pretty busy at the time to come from California to go to Florida.
Yeah.
These days, if it was something as big as that, I probably would just go down there and then work from down there. I did travel out there for SLS, which to me was, I guess, the closest to get to.
Mm-hmm.
But, and also I thought that was a chance. That might be the only time SLS launches. So, but maybe I'll get another chance. If Artemis 2 happens, I'll definitely try to go see it. But, when you go to watch something down there, I mean, you can watch it from Cocoa Beach, to see a Cape Canaveral launch, but you can't get that close. You can go to Kennedy Space Center, but again, you don't really get that close. This is just five miles away. And let's see if we can get some audio here. So, I mean, it was pretty amazing, but I would.
Wow!
Of course, I make embarrassing statements. Can you hear?
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, we got audio.
Should be about 25 seconds.
Yeah, so that was me making a calculation based on the speed of
5
sound
miles
and the
away.
distance.
Here we go.
But yeah, I didn't. I mean, there are tons of great video of this, of course,
my
that
gosh.
you can see elsewhere. So, but I want you to appreciate the sound and it finally makes it to us because
It's
you
like
could feel it.
someone thumping on your chest. I got to
Yeah,
see the space shuttle launch. I was going to ask you how it compares if you had gotten to see a launch.
Well,
But it's so loud.
yeah.
Wow. Because I guess the engines on this one, they're more powerful than the space shuttle, right? It's closer to Saturn V than the space shuttle, right?
Yeah, I'll just sort of turn this down because it's real loud in my ear. But yeah, it was about twice the thrust of Saturn V. So
Holy smokes.
it's pretty loud, and all that's sort of like, like a kind of a cackling sound. I used to think that was just the microphone clipping, but it's
the
real.
air,
It's the sort of pressure waves from the exhaust, and it's something else. And actually, if you watch slow motion video of the launch, you can sort of see these pressure waves move through the exhaust. So
It's amazing.
it's something else. Well, I'll just cut it off there. But anyway, yeah, it was pretty amazing to see in person, and
So cool.
yeah, yeah. So Yeah, it should be something. I mean, they have a ways to go in terms of being ready for Artemis. They're supposed to have the contract for the human landing system, and so we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I'm sure everything's going to be pushed back, but now with the new administration, I wouldn't be surprised if SLS got canceled. It's so ridiculously expensive. I mean, that program, it was supposed to save money. It's simpler than the shuttle. We mentioned the shuttle.
Maybe
So far,
summarize
development-
real quick what it is, if not everybody knows.
Well, SLS stands for the Space Launch System, I guess. And it's, as far as I can tell, it is a jobs program for all the shuttle contractors. The shuttle was retired in 2011, and there were sort of follow-up programs. Constellation is one that comes to mind. But this one, got funding long enough, and with a lot of lobbying from, Southern senators that are in states that had something to do with the space shuttle, namely, making the solid rocket boosters, making the external fuel tank. So basically, SLS is the sell was that it would be reusing shuttle hardware, so it should be cheaper, right? And it turns out like the cost of refurbishing the engines from the shuttle, the main shuttle engines, which it uses 4 of those, is more than they cost new. It's ridiculous.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of Tesla using the Lotus for the original Roadster. That was supposed to save money too, no?
Well, I mean, that's an ongoing argument, but I would say that it probably saved them some development time. But you certainly, if you can do everything yourself, then always that's better. But you're trying to get something out the door. There are pluses and minuses there. But with the whole cost plus structure with SLS and how expensive it's been, the development cost of SLS has been more than the shuttle. And it's much simpler than the shuttle. It's basically taking the solid rocket boosters and make them a little bigger, take the external fuel tank and just stick it in the middle, and then put a capsule on top, instead of using this, side-mounted orbiter. And the shuttle was a move towards reusability. I mean, those shuttle engines came back with the shuttle. I mean, after the external fuel tank went, those engines didn't do anything. They didn't do anything while the shuttle was on orbit. It was just that they stayed with the orbiter so they could be used again. And even the SRBs, they were fished out of the ocean and sort of refurbished. Well, I mean, the cadence of the shuttle was much lower than they wanted, and so it would have been cheaper probably, or maybe it was a wash to just make new ones. And in fact, SLS isn't even trying to recover the boosters. But at a launch rate of like one every few years, how would it make sense to reuse them anyway? I don't know if SLS is going to survive. Right now, there's a pretty complicated plan of, SLS has this Orion capsule, and which then, is supposed to, the astronauts will go up in that, and Artemis 2 is supposed to happen, I think, in 2026, which is basically just a flyby. It's kind of like the equivalent of Apollo 10. It's just the capsule is gonna go by with people in it, with 4 astronauts around the moon. But the actual landing plan, requires Starship, SpaceX to get up there. There's going to need to be refueling. And then the astronauts would transfer from the Orion into the Starship, and that would land on the moon and then also take off on the moon later and then re-rendezvous with Orion. And then Orion has a heat shield that has had some issues, but would land them. The issue is only about reusability. I mean, certainly the astronauts would survive in the capsule. It's just that, they want that heat shield to be reusable. But at any rate, but the thing is so expensive. Each launch of SLS is somewhere around like $4 billion, which is nuts. Ouch. It is so expensive. It is so expensive. In fact, there have been plans like, gee, what could we do if SLS got canceled? You could launch Orion on a Falcon Heavy. Falcon Heavy isn't human rated, but it could be human rated, you could like right now launch an SLS off, you know, you'd have to make an adapter or whatever, but you could launch it from the Falcon Heavy, and you could have a Vulcan Centaur rocket, the second stage of the Vulcan that could go up there, and then so the Centaur could dock with the Orion, and then that could take the Orion to the moon, and then from there you do the rest of the plan, which is, you know, rendezvous with Starship for the human landing system. You know, Starship isn't something you would necessarily. I can imagine bringing people back on that thing anytime soon. So because it's pretty crazy about its reentry. But maybe you could launch people from it, but I wouldn't want to risk people returning on that. So
Optimus. Send him to
stick
space.
Optimus in there as a test dummy. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Robot rated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we should be sending robots to the moon. I mean, that's you know,
Yeah.
that's a no-brainer. But
Yeah.
you know, we had one. Actually, we had a plan to send this nice rover to the south pole of the moon, and it got cut. The funding got cut, even though the rover was done. They didn't want to spend the money for whatever testing before they sent it. But they're still launching the rocket, and the rocket's getting a dummy instead of a useful payload. So it just doesn't make any sense. So we'll see. I don't know. Like Elon's talking a big game about you know, increasing government efficiency or cutting funding for
Doge.
certain things. Yeah. So you know, I'll try to be optimistic. There's no way it. There's too much of a conflict of interest, like that Elon would be able to affect the funding of things that he has a personal stake in. So I don't see, but you know, I don't know that this administration would care about that kind of stuff anyway. So I don't know.
We'll find out. Well, awesome that you shared your story. Definitely amazing. If anybody listening has a chance to go see a launch live, definitely a memorable experience.
You definitely, yeah, if you can do it. And it's so nice down there because, like, say at KSC, that's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, like if you want to go there, you have to buy tickets and they sell out.
Yes.
And you have to deal with all that sort of stuff. Whereas literally, you know, Brownsville, Boca Chica, you can just get there. It's a little bit at it. Like if you're going to fly there, like the airports are kind of small and car rental is a little difficult. And like the main car rental places aren't even at the airport, you know, so that was part of the reason I drove. And also, you know, with any rocket launch, there can be delays. This particular one was delayed by a day, and, you know, it was no problem for me since I had my own vehicle. I wasn't paying for a rental or whatever, and I was able to extend the Airbnb I had. But yeah, if you can do it, I would definitely say do it. And it was great from South Padre, though getting off South Padre Island after that launch was tough. I mean, basically the traffic was not moving for like 3 hours after the launch. But I anticipated that, and I just didn't even try.
It's like leaving Burning Man.
Well, that was, you know, the thing. So I got my car charged up, and I got there early in the morning. The launch wasn't until 4 p.m., but I got there at 8, and I had the car charged up, and I could go enjoy the beach. There was a bathroom nearby. I was close to where I wanted to watch the launch from. But, you know, I got to sit in my car, watch some Netflix, take a nap, have plenty of air conditioning. So that's how I did it. And then when the launch was done, I was, you know, watching coverage from my car because it took about an hour for the ship to go down in the Indian Ocean. And that was actually the more interesting part of this particular flight test, was how Starship fared on reentry. And so yeah, I did that, and then later I, you know, talked to people and walked for dinner or whatever. And I should mention, on my way back, I made a detour to Huntsville to go to the Marshall Space Flight Center there and NASA, and I did a tour there. And that's actually a very nice facility. But, you know, I kind of was feeling for them, like, gee, if SLS if SLS goes away, are these people going to be out of a job? Because they do a lot with respect to SLS.
Don't they have a Saturn V there too?
They do. They do.
Yeah.
They have all 3 launch stages. They don't have what was above that, like you know, the LEM and you know, though they do have a command capsule there.
Kennedy has all that.
Yeah,
well,
I saw it there.
I went to Johnson, and Johnson has a Saturn V on its side too. But I'm not sure how much, you know, more complete it is compared to what they have.
The last time I was at Kennedy, it had a Saturn on its 5 plus all the extra bits and pieces.
I saw it there too, and I did think it was funny that they translated all the units into Corvettes, basically, to make it more accessible to the common man who's walking through the museum, right? So all the thrust was expressed in the amount of Corvettes.
Well, all those astronauts of that era were driving Corvettes.
They were driving
Corvettes.
Corvettes.
So
That's right.
Maybe it was for them too.
Yeah. Well, you got to give it up for Elon. I mean, it's pretty amazing that you got to see the launch sitting in the Tesla, and you saw the rocket launch.
Well, I got out to watch the
Yeah, but you know what I mean,
I
right?
didn't sit in the Tesla during the launch.
Hey, you're driving it.
Yeah,
there,
but you
right? I mean, it's
drove
pretty
there
cool.
with the Tesla. Yeah.
It
Oh
is
yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah. I mean, I'm in the Elon ecosystem. It's true.
Yep. Well, Mike, anything else to add before we wrap it up for the day? And right on cue, I think he froze. All right.
I think
Well,
that means
everybody, I would
nothing to
say
add.
that's a wrap. Maybe Mike comes back. Maybe he doesn't.
No, he's
but
there.
He's
Okay.
back.
Yep.
Thanks to
Did you have something to add, Mike?
I think he just said no.
Nothing.
Okay, great.
Well, thanks to Danny, our producer, and thanks to everybody for joining. Always fun to see your comments in the chat. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter and YouTube. And you can, of course, join us on the TMC website. We'll see you next time.
Laters.